And when I moved to Findhorn, when I left Michael Hall to go to Findhorn, I discovered some interest in, the topics and things explored at Findhorn. But I also, Michael and Sherilyn were involved in these abstract conversations about metaphysics and psychology and anthroposophy, which is Rudolf Steiner's version of reality. And, we're prioritizing these books in many ways over my feelings, my thoughts, over connection. So it's almost as if the relationship with certain ideas and certain books took precedent over the relationship between Michael and Sherilyn and their own feelings and each other and the children. And so one of my draws to reading Occult Science when I was 13 or so, which is one of Steiner's books, and reading the starseed transmissions and Return of the Bird Tribes and bits about Edgar Cayce and things like that, at age 13, 14, was to, and then getting into environmental books. So my parents liked to think of themselves as environmentalists, even though for the most part they couldn't be bothered to compost things or buy recycled paper or recycled paper because that was a bit too much work. These were still the stated ideals in the family system. And so by reading the books and, studying I wanted, I think, in part to enter their radar, because whatever the paradigm and whatever the system is, there are certain things that matter. If you're a capitalist, you're interested in profit and loss. And they're not interested in you if you don't know what your profit and your loss is. But if you can say, well, this is my profit and loss, this is my yield, I'm considering allocating 5% into safe and bond, suddenly they're very interested because you're talking their language. And so you can exist, whereas otherwise you're just an annoyance interrupting their group. And so I think that some of the pull was towards this, just to exist, basically, and exist with some status. So, reading these books, I can't say that I found Rudolf Steiner's Occult Science terribly relevant or valuable or enjoyable. The Earth was developed in 3 periods, then it became a moon, then it became this, then there's that. I mean, what the hell does that have to do with feeling small and humiliated and having to share my bed with my brother? Nothing. But, if Michael and Sherilyn are going to go off to meetings and not talk to us, etc., to go do these things, the statement is this is somehow more important. So how do you exist in that world? Well, you read up about it so that you can say, well, do you think Steiner's correct about the this and that, or what about this? So I think there was some of that. And also certainly a sense that there's more than, meets the eye, in just conventional culture. And so you have to look at something, and the parents' interests are a place to start. And so there's some of that persona. And I think I transitioned from a traumatized, conflict-avoidant, fear-based child, afraid of being hurt, afraid of being hit, afraid of being viewed with fear and contempt, afraid of being punished psychologically, and afraid of my violence and rage and enraging people by bringing up their hypocrisy and their trigger points. which I was pretty good because I wanted to exist. And when people are avoiding traumatic terrain, etc., often finding what makes them emotional means that you get to exist because you create this effect. And I really didn't like being shouted at, being hit, being attacked, being distrusted and all that. I liked being an honorable and truthful person. And so I never got to really directly deal with my anger, my hurt, my pain, my grief, my despair, my rage, the tremendous loss and grief of losing, my third grade teacher had died at Hawthorne Valley Waldorf School, and I just went numb. And I never fully regained those feelings or was able to grieve the loss of an incredibly eventful person in my life. And and that grief is still there in my body because there's no context in this cult to do something with it. There's plenty of books, do this and do that, just for more in your head. But as I started moving into kind of metaphysics and positivity and being nice to other people, there also was not any place for rage and fear and terror and grief and loneliness and going to the past, channeled information. The past is over, moving to the new world, the new future, the new age, all of this. There's just no place to grieve in that. And this was wonderful as far as my parents were concerned because they were committed to avoiding those deep feelings to the extent that they discouraged their children from feeling those feelings directly and indirectly. And so I think I moved into somewhat of the straitjacket of the ideal, the positive, forgiving, charactered person, which became an identity, but which never connected with the rage, the hurt, the anger, the trauma, the grief, or let that go. And so all of that becomes then locked into a veneer of control, which then was strengthened to avoid Michael's torment in Vancouver, Canada, by putting on this effect to avoid being drawn in and manipulated emotionally. And so, and then when I left home, there's a sense of, don't dwell on things. We got to start a business, got to learn life skills, and, move forward. But that wound has not fully been dealt with. And so that's, the question then is, how do we get from all of these early layers and these different archetypal templates and personas and identities to the grown-up child, the grown-up adolescent, and elements of the grown-up adult that I am today.